Thank you very, very much. This has been a really fascinating and quite inspiring presentation, I think. This sense that we, clearly we are in a moment of crisis and there's a moment of loss as well. But it is also seems to be a moment of creativity and reinvention, and actually the kind of initiatives that you've discussed, I imagine a lot of them will survive this crisis because they really, again, linking up to the sort of Xavi's presentation, they are linking the citizen and the institutions at an enormous level. And it does seem that compared to central government, local government has a capacity for that kind of collaboration and symbiosis that is really powerful. And in that sense, there's an agenda beyond crisis management and response that has been accelerated. And I think you've provided a fantastic example and lots of very concrete initiatives that hopefully will trigger some ideas in our participants. Which brings me now to my own presentation, which is to share the BookingLive experience. And let me just quickly check. Can everyone see the slide there? Great, thank you. The background for us is that we are a tech company, and clearly at the heart of all these discussions, one of the things that has become very clear, certainly from your presentation, Asher, is the enabling power of technology well applied. And the fact that you also catered for those who were excluded so that you took everyone with you. But really that technology has that potential to go beyond sort of additionality into transformation. And in that respect, when the crisis hit, BookingLive, which was, I'll discuss in a second, asked itself, how can we play a part? How can we not just be a commercial player, but actually part of this movement, part of this community, part of this global search for answers and for change and interactions. And what I will share is some of the lessons that we have had from working with multiple local authorities in facing the challenges of this transformation and its opportunities, and what are perhaps the opportunities and the pain points. So there are two challenges that I think we face right now going forward. One is the recovery challenge. So millions of people, public services and businesses have suspended work. Millions, the cost of the economy to mental health is gigantic. So safely reopening the economy and our society depends on making services and venues COVID secure. And the way the government guidance has outlined this COVID security seems to be primarily about ensuring that as we reopen, the new normal, so to speak, allows us to maintain physical distance, to limit the number of people that individuals come into contact with, to change the shift patterns, to reduce occupancy. So you don't have everybody at once in the same building, in the same space, in the same side of the same building, and minimizing the need to physically queue to achieve some of those things. These seem to be the challenges ahead because we're desperate now to go out. We're desperate to go out and to open. And I think here technology, again, can play a crucial role. And this is an area where we thought we in particular could help councils and businesses and society generally achieve these goals with minimum friction. The second challenge is the resilience challenge, the business continuity challenge. The pandemic, when it hit us, stretched the logistics of society to breaking point. We all had to improvise at speed. Organizations with advanced digital transformation already, and I think following from Asher's point, also with solid community engagement in place, that combination of the two, those authorities that had solid community networks and advanced digital transformation were the most able to be resilient to these changes. Those which were behind on this have continued to struggle. And as we move into reopening, it is important to recognize that this isn't behind us. Leicester obviously went back into lockdown, and we really don't know. This is an unknown map. So second waves, future crises, future lockdowns, and crises unlike the pandemic that we haven't been able to predict, have made us think about being prepared next time, not being caught sort of having to react and plan at the same time. So what does this mean? This means automating the processes for accessing essential public services. If your helplines get swamped, you're struggling. If you have to go physically to a venue to queue in order to access those services, you're at risk. And there are many other dimensions of this. Secondly, integrating fragmented supply chains for volunteers, staff, medical supplies, donations. So I am aware that this is something that certainly I've discussed with Asher in the past, but I'm sure it's familiar to all of you that suddenly you were flooded with offers of solutions and equipment and resources which were vitally needed, but you did not have the bandwidth or the system to process them strategically or intelligently. So some places just went for the biggest players, etc. So we'll discuss it, but being able to be prepared in case this happens again, to engage all of society's solutions in a systematic way is another challenge. And lastly, freeing up staff from routine queries and non-essential duties to concentrate on emergency or complex queries. So these are the two areas where we identified we had a role to play. Who is BookingLive? We're an example of a tech company, one of your potential tech partners out of many of us who are there hoping to make a difference. We are concretely the #1 public sector booking, scheduling, and reservation provider. We have more than 11 now, product solutions for all kinds of elements of digital infrastructure. We also have created a free solution for SMEs and community groups to be able to fill that gap. And there is at the moment no real alternative. So it's really the only thing in town for that. And finally, we also have worked with very large corporates. So this gives you a range of the kind of people that we've worked with. This is the kind of experience that we're coming from. And this is what we were doing before the pandemic. When the pandemic came, we tried to use all of the experience of these interactions and the domain knowledge, so to speak, to identify how do we help you help the rest of society, including ourselves in that sense. So our experience was we basically reshaped, hacked our systems to provide solutions as needs emerged. And there were a number of needs that we identified. So one I had mentioned already, public services automation. So running your pest control, your social housing maintenance, your libraries, your bulk waste collection, your registrars, your tree officers, childcare, taxi licensing, many of these services ground to a halt in many local authorities because there weren't the systems to allow interaction between the citizen and the authority without layers of now furloughed or home-based workers. So being able to automate these core public services so that the citizen can access them at all times, 24 hours, in very fine-grained ways was one area. Secondly, clearly appointments and training sort of become either are crucial or are restarting now. So a counselor might have a surgery, or you might have counseling services, or you might have advice services, or you might have staff training, especially now with health and safety, or equalities, or induction. And if again, people have to ring someone that has to be available at the time, being put on a waiting list, you are disenfranchising people at a very critical moment. So this was the other sort of broad area. Another area was capacity and density management. So how do you ensure that you don't have the scenes that we saw in beaches, in parks, with masses of people? Some private beaches used parking apps to try and manage this. Obviously, they were improvising. But so we've developed sort of approaches to do that, and we're looking to further innovate at a very sophisticated way with, university partners, etc., for that kind of density management for the high streets, etc. The other element of local authorities that we found was that you are points of contact. So in the Newport City Council, for example, when they wanted to help with the recovery of local businesses, Rather than commission us directly, what they did was make our free solution available to the local business community. And this, we had a fantastic story of one tour guide whose business had collapsed, but through this free booking app was able to pivot from business to direct services, and then work with his industry to revive the entire tour industry in Wales during these initiatives. So being able to become mediators for technological innovation amongst your stakeholders in the community and business sector, not just direct providers, was the other area. And then the final set of things are, of course, rota management. How do you ensure that access to your council offices, that to your desks? Some hospitals, for example, have divide their staffing to one side of the room and the other side of the room. So being able to have that level of granularity where you can sort of plan the bookings of sort of very specific subspaces within your spaces was a big part of some of these collaborations. Online and physical events, again, facilitating that process, being able to just book and be connected onto your Zoom meeting or onto your citizen engagement session, hires and bookings of rooms, of sports facilities, etc., which again has to do with that social distancing, has to do with being able to predict traffic, has also been able to, all of this to give us data. And finally, the supply chain management solution that I mentioned. What made us come out top 10 globally in this global hack was creating a system whereby if a crisis comes again and you get 500 suppliers coming up with solutions to you, we've created a system that means they can upload onto the system their offerings, and you can then decide which ones you take and then make them instantly available to the entire population at the click of a few buttons. So these were the kind of solutions that we worked. Now, what is our learning from collaborating with you? What is our core sort of findings here? What are the pain points? One was the ability of local authorities to react quickly. Some authorities were very excited by our solutions, but had issues around commissioning and procurement that made it difficult for them to be prepared to react quickly in a crisis. So they had to make do with incomplete solutions that either they themselves had created or they had co-opted because they didn't have time to go through those processes. So putting fast procurement, emergency procurement processes that can allow you to react quickly would be one of them. Secondly, overcoming fragmentation. Some of these solutions were adopted by one corner of a city council, but not by another, where actually would have made sense for the authority to be able to apply this approach across services. So integrating all that, and I've already talked about supply chains. And finally, the challenge of maintaining strategic focus. How do you not just react, but how do you engage partners like us in planning? Because you don't know what you don't know, and obviously we don't know what we don't know. But if you could have tech partners in your strategic visioning of the direction of the city, then again, you're able to flow in a much more productive way. In terms of impact, I will finish with this. One very good example was Charnwood City Council, who did take a very strategic approach to our collaboration. And they looked at how they could use our system to automate their citizen interaction. And the impact was dramatic. They measured it and quantified it. This is their figures, not ours. And they found that sort of from something like 20 or 30%, 88% of orders moved online for bookings, for everything, showing that the demand in the citizen for that direct contact is there. A 68% reduction in calls, 50% reduction in administrative tasks and still rising, 29 hours reduction in advisors' resources, cost savings, and enormous customer satisfaction, citizen satisfaction. Average admin time saved per month, 16 hours. Average self-service bookings made per month, 94%. Average additional revenue generated from some of their initiatives, 36K. This is obviously just an illustration, but the point is that this is a very hard impact that gives you not just the ability to react but to function in a more efficient way and to face the challenges of tightening budgets. So that's really where I wanted to kind of finish, by saying that we are one example, and obviously our solutions may very well be exactly what you need, but we represent the tech sector more generally in that sense, and finding ways of interacting with our sector and involving us in thought leadership and in the process of policy making, not just in product commissioning, might be something that, that could help us both in the immediate recovery phase and in the long-term reopening phase.